And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back and with a loud voice glorified God and fell down on his face at his feet, giving him thanks. And he was a Samaritan. From the 15th and 16th verses of the 17th chapter, the Gospel according to St. Luke. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. There's a stark contrast here between the Samaritan leper and the 9 Jewish lepers in response to the healing that Jesus Christ performed on all of them at the same time. Now, our first concern should be to mark how God's Son deals with good and with evil, how he responds to the froward and to the righteous. Froward, there's a good old-fashioned English word. It's the opposite of toward. Sometimes we say untoward. That means toward. And fro means fromward or away from. These people were froward, the 9, that wouldn't come and thank God. It's just a very ordinary thing to do. Even animals do it. If you do them a favor, they consider you their friend. And they snuggle up to you and they want to show affection for it. It happens all over the world. But these 9 Jewish lepers, when healed, in contrast to the outcast Samaritan leper, when he was healed, they had no time to say thank you. They saw their fellow healed and turning back and praising God for it, and they did the opposite. They knew, as well as he did, that they had received the gift, but they continued absolutely shut-mouthed, dumb, in relation to whoever it was that had given them this gift. It didn't come out of nowhere. They called Jesus by name and called him Master and asked for his mercy. They knew where it came from. Now, why do I say we should mark, our first concern is to mark how the Son of God deals with contrariness? Well, it's because we're his disciples. At least we claim to be. We say he's our Maker, he's our Redeemer, he's our Lord, he's our God, and he's also our friend and our brother, and he is our example. John, the apostle, says it reports Jesus saying it this way in John 14:6 and 9. I am the way. Listen to that. I am the way. How do you deal with trouble? How do you deal with contrary people? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. And he also said, he who hath seen me hath seen the Father. We have in Jesus a manifestation of God himself, as well as the very person of God. There are various ways to describe it, but he said this, he who hath seen me hath seen the Father. And we know that his reaction to what he was confronted with when he had performed a work of mercy and was answered back, you might say, with bold-faced self-centeredness and a shut mouth and turned shoulder and a turned back. In other words, kind of an insult. John also says this, we are God's sons, and we're going to be like him when he shall appear. So it behooves us to study him the way good disciples do a person that they're following. To learn his spirit, his way, and what he commands us, and what he leads us to do by his example. And even the Apostle Paul adds his description this way. We are all children of God by faith in Jesus Christ. That's Galatians 3:26. And verse 27, all who have been baptized have put on Jesus Christ. We have put on Christ. Now, one of the most difficult things human beings have to do is to deal with those who are contrary. and those who are even abusive, or those who are just plain wrong in the way they behave towards others. And we each have our own formula for it. And we're first inclined to consult our own human nature. And that human nature says, you can give as good as you can get. In other words, hand it back to them the way they handed it to you. In other words, that's kind of giving everybody as just desserts. That's really the gospel of the world. It really is. And it's the way human beings are. If you bite a dog, he's going to bite you back, you see. If you trouble him, he'll bite. And any other animal is like that. They're going to attack if you give them a hard time. Some are more patient than others, but ultimately they can be pushed to that point. And so we want to know what God's reaction is. And this leads us to study both the grossness of the insult and also the restrained nature of the response of Jesus. Ingratitude is one of the worst insults. It's grossly rude, it's grossly self-centered, it shows selfish pride, it shows contempt of everybody else in the world. Maybe you remember the words of the poet when he said, "Blow, blow, thou winter wind, thou art not so sharp as man's ingratitude." Well put. Ingratitude is very bitter and very hard to take. But note this, Jesus saw it, but he commented on it only gently. He didn't scold. He was very gentle about his rebuke. There were 10 healed, but where are the 9? Only one stranger came back to glorify God. In other words, he's approving of praising God and thanking him for the miracle, and he's disapproving of those who neglect to do it. And he leaves it at that. He doesn't berate the other 9 Jewish lepers who were totally ungrateful, unthankful, speechless, rude, towards the one that had asked for the healing and received it. A healing so momentous it changed their whole lives. It brought them back from being outcasts living in a cave on the outside of town where nobody could get near them because they had a contagious disease, to being received back into society and community and even the temple again. All this they had in an instant. They didn't value it a penny's purchase as far as their reaction to Christ was concerned, who gave it to them. And yet, he just notes it. He says, I saw it. There's only a stranger that came back and gave thanks. And you know what he's doing is, he is reflecting God's nature. God sends the sun and the seasonal rain upon the just and the unjust. He doesn't say, look, this guy gave me a hard time last week. I won't shine the sun on him. Everybody else in the world will get it. But not that character. That's what human beings do. I will show my good graces to so-and-so, but not to that idiot because he gave me a hard time. But no, God lets the sun shine on the just and the unjust. And he sends the rain on the crops of the just and the unjust. Because he's God, and he's even-handed, and he's used to taking care of the contrary and the froward. And another reason, Jesus had just performed a work of mercy, a work of blessing. And would it be fitting for cursing and berating and scolding and troubling the same person to whom you just delivered a blessing and a healing? You can't mix the two, really. And it's kind of like that verse in James where it says, James 3:10, out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can Jesus send forth blessing and healing, at the same time curse these men because they didn't receive it properly? It's out of character with the act of blessing. And as St. Paul puts it in Romans 12, I think it's verse 17, recompense to no man evil for evil. But what is the other opposite reaction? Oh, be not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And that's Romans 12:21. And this is what Jesus was doing. And is it not a picture of what God does to humanity when he gave them his promise of redemption? And then they believed it in the times of the old fathers, which lasted 2,500 years from the time of the Garden of Eden until the time of the law being given to Moses. All the Old Testament people in that time had no law, and yet they followed and believed God by faith, and even made sacrifices to him. By faith, not because it was written in a law book, but because they loved him for having loved them so, and having promised a Redeemer who would come at cost to himself to save them and redeem them. And Job, way before Abraham and Moses, said, I know that my Redeemer liveth. You know how much those old people knew before they even heard about the law and the Ten Commandments? They had a Redeemer, and he was eternal, and he was alive in the old days, and that he would be in the latter days as well, and that Job, even though dead, would rise from the dead and see him with his own eyes. All this was known to the old prophets long before the law was given, long before the Ten Commandments, long before the Torah, long before all the rituals and the sacrifices, long before the prophets of the Old Testament time, during the time of the law. Long before all that, God was known to his faithful. And it's in the Book of Common Prayer, the 7th article of religion. It says that the religion was never different from what it is today. It was always by faith in Jesus Christ. Even back in the time of the old fathers, in the Old Testament, as we've just now recited. Those older people, before the time of the law even, knew Jesus Christ. They didn't know him by that name, but they knew him as the Redeemer. And they worshipped him and believed him. Like Abraham believed God, Genesis 15:6. That's what was going on. And so God is merciful and has been all through history. And the old covenant of the law and the sacrifices was a ministry of death. Why? It was a correction to the people to bring them back from their wandering and godless, doubting, unbelieving state. And to remind them that God was there and that he had standards and that those were written in the hearts of the old-time believers, but these people didn't have it in their hearts. So it had to be written in stone for them. And the purpose of that was to show the judgment day, to show that God hates sin, and that he is in an eternal war against sin. And it is also to show that nobody can measure up to his requirement. His requirement is perfection. Jesus even says it in the New Testament. The old law was put there not to prove you could keep it, but to prove you couldn't keep it. And these people, during Jesus' time, had developed a false religion of rejecting a Redeemer and believing they were not sinners, but were righteous because they kept the law. That was the religion that infected the Pharisees, and which we must conclude infected the Jewish men who were lepers, who were healed but refused to thank God for it. Let us trace this out a little farther. The beauty of the Spirit of Jesus in dealing with this contrary situation is an inspiration to every Christian, or should be. And it should lead us to ask him to explain to us and to show us his wisdom and understanding of what the problem was that prevented these lepers from thanking him. and made them the rude and self-centered individuals that they were. And how this fits in with his kingdom, with his timeline, with his coming judgment, and with his redemption and blessing. We want to understand this. If we walk away from it just saying they were wicked people and write it off and leave it there, we haven't gained much. But we should try, through his wisdom and understanding, to understand their situation. And only for a godly purpose. For God's purpose in dealing with us and helping us to overcome and not fall into the same error. That's the first thing. And also for the purpose of appreciating his restraint and kindness even when confronted with the grossest of evils. These are the reasons we have to look into this. So let's examine why the 9 lepers were ingrates, why they were rude, why they were selfish, why they didn't even think of opening their mouth once with any kind of thanks or recognition or acknowledgement to God for the favor, this overwhelming favor, this rescue that they had received from him. First of all, it's human nature. We've covered that already. It's this egocentric nature that approves self, fears, envies, distrusts, and fights against and devours others. Always puts self higher on the level of judgment than anybody else in the world, and has various reasons for putting others down in a lower place, and wants to keep it that way. That's human nature. But there's one more factor. You'd say, well, the Samaritan had a human nature too, didn't he? But his human nature gave way in the face of the spirit of the kindness and goodness and mercy of God. But the spirit of the Jewish lepers didn't give way in the face of the same kindness and mercy of God towards them. And the reason can be traced to this. They were brought up in the Pharisaical error of believing that they were righteous. And when the Pharisees believed they were righteous, just as that Pharisee, when he came to the temple to pray, didn't pray at all, but boasted that he was sinless. Whereas the publican knew he was a sinner and came to the temple with no claim of anything but a request for mercy. Mercy. The very thing that is not owed to you or to anybody. It is not given by debt because nobody can earn mercy. Mercy is exactly the thing which you did not earn and you're not entitled to. It's purely the grace of the giver. Nothing on your part or mine is going to call for mercy for us at the last judgment, but God's grace. God's grace. No accomplishment of ours can be laid there in the balance to say, because of that, show me mercy. No, that's not how mercy works. Mercy is grace to the undeserving. That's by definition what mercy is. So we are the undeserving. But the Pharisees taught they were not undeserving, they were deserving. And that's why the Pharisee at prayer is a picture of what the whole problem was. He couldn't ask God for mercy because he didn't believe he had any sins that he needed mercy to obtain forgiveness for. He didn't acknowledge any. He acknowledged only his good deeds. It wasn't a prayer at all. And it was the teaching of the Pharisees, we are righteous. Others outside of the law are accursed, and they are the sinners. What did people say when they were arguing about who Jesus was? The Pharisees answered those who believed in him and said, you know nothing. This people that knoweth not the law are accursed. And they dropped the argument at that point and walked off. You were kicked out of the temple if you believed that you were a sinner and you need God's mercy. No place for that in the Pharisees' temple. They were the righteous ones. There was no place for mercy. And yet their own Ark of the Covenant had a mercy seat on it. That was the place where God's meeting with man took the form of an act of mercy. The seat at the top of the ark was for God's mercy to rest upon them. That's what it's called, the mercy seat. It's guarded by cherubim on both sides. Where is mercy if you don't need mercy? If you don't crave it? If you don't appreciate it when it's given to you? You turn your back and walk away from it. But they were a picture of the Pharisaical gospel, which is, I am not a sinner. Others are. I don't need a redeemer. I am righteous. And I can recite the reasons for it. That was the way he stood in God's temple and thought and spoke. And that's the teaching. And therefore, what does that do? If you have the natural human inclination to be self-centered, and then you have a gospel that says, you're in the right, you don't need any help from anybody, you don't owe any thanks to anybody, you don't ask for mercy from anybody because you don't need mercy, you're all righteous. You're never going to have a place in your makeup to say thank you to anybody. And it's taking this human nature, confirming it with a wicked, wrong theological principle that you're sinless and you don't need mercy and you don't need a redeemer, that made them react the way they did. And it's that blindness to their own need for a redeemer, their own need for mercy, their own need for righteousness, which they don't have, which the Pharisees had no use for that thought. It's their blindness to that prevented them from being thankful both to God and to man. They never said thank you to anybody. There's some people, you can observe it over a period of time, they never say thank you for anything. I pray for them because there's a quirk in their belief system that makes them think that they don't owe thanks to anybody. But here it was, a cardinal point of Pharisaical doctrine, that you are sinless because of your compliance with the law and by your descent from Abraham. They put it all together. You are sinless. Nobody can tell you what to do. You don't need correction, and therefore you don't need God's mercy because you need correction. None of that. You don't have room for that. And that's why these men were the way they were. But are they so far from human nature? No. It is really human nature, just magnified and confirmed by a false theological belief that cemented it in their character and their makeup. But without that false theological belief, the same human nature would have been there. But the Samaritan was overcome by the goodness of God, and he knew he needed mercy, and he saw it when it came. He didn't have a roadblock there that says, you never need to ask for mercy from God because you're one of the righteous. He doesn't have anything to give you. You already have it. He didn't have that error built in. But there is an error in human nature today which stands in the place of the shoes of the Pharisees in those days, and we hardly recognize it. You know what it is? It's the gospel of the good person. Good person. Are you a good person? Oh, that's all right. Don't be too hard on me about my faults because I'm a good person. At least I always try to be a good person. There was some movie recently, not too long ago, about somebody who died in battle, and as his last words were these: I hope my men believed that I was always trying to be a good person. Can you believe a person going to war and dying so that this can be his final testimony in life before he dies? Oh, I just want everybody to know that I always tried to be a good person. And when people stand before the throne of God on the judgment day, I want you to remember this, because it's going to come up inside of you, and it's going to urge you to be expressed through your voice and your throat and your tongue. And that is going to say inwardly, but nobody's perfect. I did the best I could. I always tried to be a good person. And that's all that counts. And God isn't going to buy that. Why? Because you're not trusting in Him for your righteousness. Simple as that. You're in the same shoes the Pharisees were when you do that. You're putting your goodness before God's. You're putting your goodness in place of God's. If you have your goodness, you don't need God's. If you don't need God's goodness, you don't need a Redeemer. You don't need a Savior. You don't need Jesus. You're not sick. You don't need a doctor or physician. You don't need those things. But wait until the judgment day, and you'll see where that kind of belief leads. I'm telling you that we don't have to look down our noses at the Pharisees so much, but learn from them and see the similarity between their attitude and what so many Christians live by today. At least I always tried to do well. At least, and then urge that as their justification. With that, I can hold my head high and walk through the world because I know I always at least tried to do well. Everybody makes mistakes, but I'm a good person. And at least I always tried to be. There you have it. The recipe for utter and total disaster. Being blind to the need for God's forgiveness is the explanation of being blind to ordinary good manners and thankfulness towards others. One cancels out the other. That's what happened here. And just try to picture that last day and have in your mind, instead of what your human nature says, and instead of what the Pharisees would claim when they stand before the judgment seat of Christ. I always did right. I fast twice in a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. I give my half of my goods to feed the poor, and recite all the things that I do that are good. And God's going to yawn and look the other way. And he's waiting. What is he waiting for? He's waiting for something that we have in our own hymnal. It's hymn 409. One of the best and simplest hymns ever written. And it says, just as I am, without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee. I have no other claim. I have no other card up my sleeve. I have no other leg to stand on. I don't have any other hope that I was a good person. I don't have any thought that at least I tried. All of that falls away and crumbles to ashes, just as I am, without one plea of mine, only that thy blood was shed for me. God, look not on me, but you died for me. I trust that your blood is my redemption and your seal of goodwill and salvation toward me. That's all. You gave it. I see it. I accept it. Take everything else I've done and trash it. It's worth zero or less than zero in this transaction. That's all I have. And you can stand before the judgment seat of God with that. And he says, those that believe me, he that believeth me hath everlasting life and shall not come into condemnation. John 5:24. Shall not come into condemnation. There's your past before the judgment seat of Christ. Not one plea, but that his blood was shed for me. That's it. That's it. And if we have that in our heart towards him, then we'll have it towards other people too. We'll be patient with them when they abuse us. We won't return evil for evil, but contrariwise blessing, knowing, as St. Peter put it in 1 Peter 3:9, knowing that you were to inherit a blessing. If you're to inherit a blessing, how can you curse others? Let them curse you, but don't return it. Jesus gave us an example that we should follow his steps on the cross. He didn't curse those who murdered him. He asked their forgiveness. He does the same towards us. He asks us to follow in his steps. When he suffered, he threatened not. When he was cursed, he didn't return the curse. He made an inward prayer to commit himself to God who judges all things rightly. That's St. Peter 2:21-23. He left us an example that we should follow his steps. And that's what we've been saying this whole message through. The Samaritan leper was not snared by that error of claiming inner righteousness, the Pharisaical error. And so he was saved, and the Spirit spoke through him. Let us remark that, as well as finding what the problem with the other nine lepers was. Look what the good thing was that the Good Samaritan, or in this case, the only good one, the Samaritan, brought to this transaction. He received the Spirit. What did he do when he was healed? He didn't say, "Thank you, Jesus." He glorified God. That's what it says. Look at it. He glorified God with a loud voice. He knew that what Jesus, the man, had done for him was God's act. He didn't know that except because he was indwelt by the Holy Spirit. And that's what Jesus meant when he said to him, "Go thy way, thy faith hath saved thee." That's what he said to him when he fell down at Jesus' feet. Thy faith hath saved thee. His faith was not just that Jesus could heal him and had healed him, but it was God acting. It was God who did it. And he glorified God. And all his confidence at that point was in God. He wasn't saying, "I brought anything to this transaction. I had this coming because I'm inherently good and righteous. I always try to be good. And so when the good things happen to me, it's normal." No. That's wickedness. That's hellish thought. That's the devil's idea. He had nothing there but a loss. And he glorified God for the rescue. And it was the depth of his loss that made him, and realization of it, that made him all the more capable of magnifying God with a loud voice and glorifying him. When you do that, when you glorify God with a loud voice, you're abandoning everything else. You're not claiming any credit for self. You're putting all the credit on his side. That's what it means. Glorified God with a loud voice and fell down at the feet of Jesus. It's another way of showing I have no claim of my own. It's to fall down, as the old people in the Semitic tradition did. I guess they were accustomed to bowing down before one another. They would both bow with their face to the ground, as Jacob did when he finally met his brother Esau. Again, he bowed down face to the ground. That was the form of greeting. Well, that's in spirit what everyone should be doing towards God. And was such a beautiful example of it in the Samaritan. He saw his need for mercy. He saw his need for mercy in the matter of his leprosy. And it was a small step from there to see his need for mercy in relation to his sinful life. Small step. He put the two together and he glorified God for healing him. Lord God, keep us near thy cross, penitent, trusting solely in the merit of Jesus Christ and in nothing of our own. In this way, thy Spirit may clearly, through us, glorify thee for forgiving, for healing, for cleansing, for saving, and for making our lives show that we love and praise thee as that humble Samaritan leper did when Jesus healed him. This we ask in thy Son Jesus Christ's name. Amen.